In 2017, Jay Austen and Lauren Giagan made a bold decision, one that most people only dream about. Both 29 years old and living in Washington, D.C., they left behind stable, respectable careers. Jay at the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and Lauren as a senior admissions officer at Georgetown University. Why? To chase a dream. To bike across the world, documenting the kindness of strangers and the beauty of humanity along the way. Their blog quickly became a hit with readers, full of vivid stories and stunning photos from their journey. They started in South Africa, pedaling through sweeping landscapes and vibrant communities. From there, they cycled across Morocco, absorbing the culture and navigating the rugged Casablanca mountains. It wasn't just about sightseeing. They wanted to live intentionally, to prove that the world is more kind than cruel. And for a while, it was. Time and time again, they were met with warmth, hospitality, and selfless acts from complete strangers. In their writing, they reflected on the goodness of people and how fear too often distorts our view of the world. One blog post stood out, an optimistic Q&A where they answered questions about the dangers of global cycling. Relatively speaking, bike touring is really safe, they wrote. The biggest danger is cars, not people. That entry would later haunt their readers. On July 29, 2018, Jay and Lauren were cycling through Tajikistan, a country known for its breathtaking mountain scenery and ancient Silk Road history. They were joined by two other cyclists, one Swiss and one Dutch. Together, the group was riding about 60 miles south of the capital, Dushanbe. Then, the unthinkable happened. A sedan sped toward them, suddenly veering off the road and slamming into the group. The impact was catastrophic, but the horror didn't stop there. The car's occupants, 5 men, got out, armed with knives, and brutally attacked the injured cyclists. It was a calculated ambush. Jay and Lauren were killed in the attack, as were their fellow cyclists. The suspects fled the scene in their blood-soaked vehicle, heading toward the Afghanistan border. But their escape didn't go unnoticed. Villagers in the remote town of Tutbo spotted the damaged car and grew suspicious. When the men ditched the vehicle, locals alerted the authorities and even followed the attackers on foot to ensure they didn't vanish into the wilderness. Soon, law enforcement caught up. One assailant was killed after resisting arrest. The next day, 3 more were found and shot during a confrontation. The final suspect, Hussein Abdusamadov, was captured alive. He was later revealed to be the group's ringleader. What came next was even more chilling. A video surfaced, recorded before the attack, in which the men pledged allegiance to ISIS. Abdusamadov showed no remorse during interrogation. His trial, held behind closed doors, ended with the harshest penalty under Tajik law: life imprisonment. Jay and Lauren's story is heartbreaking. 2 idealistic, kind-hearted people set out to prove that the world is filled with goodness, and for the most part, it was. But their journey ended in unspeakable violence, a tragic reminder that even the most inspiring adventures can carry unimaginable risks. Still, their story endures, not because of how it ended, but because of how bravely it began. It was a clear, crisp evening in January 2025 when 21-year-old Eva McCarthy set out for a climb in southern Spain. A final-year physiology student from Shankill, Dublin, Eve was no stranger to adventure. That day, she and a male climbing partner had chosen the stunning yet notoriously dangerous trail near El Caminito del Rey, a place as breathtaking as it is deadly. This former workers' path, built into the cliffs of El Chorro Gorge, is now a tourist hotspot for thrill seekers. The trail hugs the rock face hundreds of feet above the ground, with sections so narrow that a single misstep could be fatal. And while it's been renovated in recent years, many parts remain treacherous, especially near the Swiss sector and Arabic staircase, where Eve was climbing. Around 7 p.m. as they began their descent through a particularly unstable section, something went terribly wrong. Both Eve and her climbing partner lost their footing. He managed to grab onto a bush-covered rock, miraculously stopping his fall. Eve wasn't as lucky. She plunged nearly 500 feet into the ravine below. Despite the quick response of emergency crews, she had not survived. Her climbing partner was rescued alive, shaken but safe. Eve's body was recovered shortly afterward. The news of her death shook not only her family and friends, but the wider community back home in Dublin and the outdoor world alike. Shockingly, hers was the second fatal fall on that same stretch of trail within a month. Back in Shankill, Eve was remembered as so much more than just a victim of a tragic accident. She was vibrant, outgoing, and full of energy, the kind of person who made friends wherever she went. She worked part-time at King's Pub in Dalkey, where she was known for her quick wit, infectious laugh, and ability to light up a room. The pub closed its doors for 3 days in her honor. Her parents, Helen and Paul McCarthy, were heartbroken. In a moving tribute, they described Eve as a bright light in the lives of everyone who knew her, fiercely determined, endlessly curious, and always kind. She had a passion for basketball, and though she wasn't the tallest on the court, her speed and grit made her a force to be reckoned with. Friends remembered how their house was always full. Eve had that way of bringing people together. Whether it was for a spontaneous road trip or a late-night chat over tea, she was always up for an adventure. That adventurous spirit is part of what led her to Spain and to Caminito del Rey. Her funeral at St. Anne's Church in Shankill was packed. So many came that some had to watch the service from the parish center and even online. Former classmates, neighbors, co-workers, and teammates all gathered to say goodbye, sharing memories of the girl who never stopped moving, dreaming, or laughing. Eve's passing served as a grim reminder of the risks that come with high adrenaline travel. Just a month earlier, a 20-year-old British climber lost his life in the same area. Despite new safety measures, such as handrails, harness lines, and repaired walkways, the trail still poses real danger. The altitude, unstable ground, and narrow paths make it unforgiving even for seasoned climbers. Eve McCarthy's life was cut short far too soon, but her impact was undeniable. She was a spark, someone who lived boldly and loved deeply. Her story is one of adventure, spirit, and heartbreaking loss. Though she's no longer here, the people who loved her carry her memory forward every day. And for those who walk dangerous paths, her story is a reminder to never take a single step for granted. In what should have been the happiest chapter of their lives, Ben and Katherine Mullan's story took a heartbreaking and unthinkable turn. The couple, both 31 and newly married, had just tied the knot in a beautiful ceremony in Pontardawe, Wales, surrounded by friends, family, and hopes for a future filled with adventure, career milestones, and quiet Sunday mornings. Ben, a former South Wales police officer who had recently started training as a physiotherapist, and Katherine, a freshly qualified doctor, were the kind of couple you'd root for, grounded, loving, and full of dreams. And where better to kick off a new life together than on the sun-drenched shores of Antigua, a tropical escape that looks like something off a honeymoon brochure. They had chosen the Cocos Hotel, a stunning cliffside resort on the island's west coast, known for its private cottages, panoramic sea views, and the kind of relaxed vibe that makes you forget your phone password. Their honeymoon was going swimmingly. Lazy beach days, island sunsets, romantic dinners, all the good stuff. But as their dream trip neared its end, the unthinkable happened. In the early hours of July 27, 2008, just hours before they were due to fly home, two men broke into their bungalow in what was believed to be a robbery gone horrifically wrong. What unfolded was brutal. The intruders, Caniel Martin and Avi Howell, were both in their early 20s and armed with a gun. They forced Ben and Katherine to kneel beside their bed and then shot them both in the back of the head. Katherine died instantly. Ben, somehow, incredibly, survived the initial shooting. He was airlifted back to the UK in a desperate attempt to save his life, but despite the efforts of doctors, including some of Katherine's colleagues, he passed away a week later, never regaining consciousness. It was a story that gripped the UK and Antigua alike. Two bright young professionals with their whole lives ahead of them, taken in the most senseless and devastating way imaginable. The murder investigation was fast-tracked, and the Antiguan authorities, with help from UK officers, moved quickly. The suspects, Martin and Howell, weren't exactly strangers to law enforcement. They had a history of violent behavior and were soon linked to the crime through DNA, ballistics, and the stolen items traced back to them. Shockingly, the pair were also charged with another murder, that of 43-year-old local shopkeeper Juanita Anderson, killed in her store just 2 weeks after the Mullans were shot. Their spree of violence left a trail of grief in its wake, and the courtroom was packed when the case went to trial in 2011. Over weeks of testimony, the jury heard harrowing details of the couple's final moments and the forensic evidence that sealed the killer's fate. Both Martin and Howell were found guilty on all counts. While Antigua technically still has the death penalty on the books, the judge decided the case didn't meet the threshold of the worst, the legal requirement for capital punishment. So they were sentenced to life imprisonment. Not one life sentence, but 3 each. They'll be spending the rest of their lives behind bars, far from the paradise they destroyed. Out of this unimaginable tragedy, something positive emerged. Determined to preserve Ben and Catherine's memory and continue their legacy, their families established the Mullan Fund. The charity supports students pursuing careers in health and medicine, fields that the couple had devoted themselves to. It's the kind of legacy that turns grief into purpose and pain into progress. Through scholarships and community support, the Mullan Fund has helped young people follow in Ben and Catherine's footsteps, giving back to a world that took so much from them. The murders also shook Antigua's tourism industry and triggered a national conversation about crime and public safety. With international attention focused on the island, officials were pushed to reassess law enforcement procedures and tighten security around resorts. It was a wake-up call, one that led to reforms, but also left a lasting scar on the island's reputation. More than a decade later, the story of Ben and Katherine Mullan still resonates, not just as a tragic tale of a honeymoon gone horribly wrong, but as a reminder of how fragile life can be. Their names live on through the lives they've touched, the students they've inspired, and the love they left behind. It's a story with heartbreak at its core, yes, but also one that shows how, even in the darkest moments, humanity can find a way to carry the light forward. Eva Louu, a bright 21-year-old from Naperville, Illinois, had just wrapped up an intense academic journey. She'd earned both her bachelor's and master's degrees in computer science from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and she was on the cusp of beginning a promising new chapter, her dream job as a software engineer at Microsoft. But before diving into the working world, Eva wanted one last carefree adventure, a chance to breathe, to explore, to celebrate. On June 14, 2023, she set out on a trip to Germany with her close friend and fellow classmate, Kelsey Chang. One of the highlights, a hike to the breathtaking Neuschwanstein Castle in Bavaria, a fairy tale fortress nestled in the Alps and one of Germany's most iconic landmarks. That day, under a clear blue sky, the two friends made their way toward the Marienbrücke Bridge, a narrow footbridge suspended 300 feet above a gorge. From there, visitors can take in panoramic views of the majestic castle and the surrounding mountains. It was supposed to be a day filled with awe and joy, but it turned into something unimaginably dark. While hiking, the two women met another traveler, 30-year-old Troy Philip Bowling, an American who struck up friendly conversation. He seemed harmless enough, knowledgeable about the area, and even suggested they follow a less traveled path for an even better view, a hidden spot that promised picture-perfect selfies. Trusting his suggestion, Eva and Kelsey agreed. But as they ventured farther from the main trail, things began to feel off. The path grew more secluded, and the air heavier with unease. And then, everything changed. Without warning, Bowling turned violent. He shoved Eva to the ground and tried to undress her, his intention clear and horrifying. Kelsey, seeing her friend in danger, immediately jumped in to help. In the chaos that followed, Bowling overpowered her, choking her until she lost consciousness, then pushing her down a steep 50-meter slope. Kelsey survived the fall, sustaining serious injuries, but she was alive. Bowling then returned to Eva. He strangled her until she passed out, sexually assaulted her, and coldly pushed her over the edge. Her body, already battered from the attack, could not survive the fall. The vibrant young woman, full of promise and excitement for the future, was gone. Rescue teams arrived on the scene and found Kelsey injured but responsive. Eva, in critical condition, was airlifted to a hospital, but tragically, she died overnight from her injuries. What should have been a joyful memory became a nightmare etched in horror. Bowling tried to flee but was arrested shortly after. His trial revealed even more disturbing details. Investigators found child sexual abuse material on his devices, and the court confirmed that neither Eva nor Kelsey had known him before that fateful encounter. Bowling pled guilty to murder and sexual assault. His lawyer claimed the attack was spontaneous and that Bowling was ashamed of his actions, but the charges, including murder, attempted murder, and possession of child abuse imagery, left little room for leniency. In Germany, a murder conviction can mean life in prison, and few would argue he deserves anything less. This tragic story is a chilling reminder. Even the most picturesque destinations can hide unthinkable dangers. It was a crisp Saturday in 2015 when 24-year-old Christy Kfkala laced up her boots for a hike she'd dreamed about since arriving in Norway. A student from Melbourne on exchange at the University of Bergen, Christy was studying music and cultural studies. She was full of life, drawn to the outdoors, and always up for a challenge. Trolltunga, Norway's dramatic cliff jutting 700 meters above Lake Ringedalsvatnet, was the perfect adventure. The trail to Trolltunga is no easy stroll. It's a long, steep hike over rocky terrain, and conditions can be unpredictable. But for thrill seekers and nature lovers, the view from the tongue-shaped rock formation makes every step worth it. That day, Christy and two friends joined a larger group of around 30 hikers making the trek together. After hours of climbing, they finally reached the summit. The scenery was stunning. Sheer cliffs, glacial lakes, and that famous ledge drawing tourists from all over the world. People posed for photos, edged toward the cliff for the perfect shot, and soaked in the beauty around them. Christy and her friends waited their turn, chatting and taking in the view. When another group began taking photos near the edge, Christy stepped aside, moving along a narrow side path to avoid getting in their way. It wasn't for a photo. It wasn't a dare. It was a simple, courteous move, but the ground beneath her feet was unstable, littered with loose rocks. And then it gave way. There was no cry for help, no scream, just silence. Her friends, only steps ahead, turned around to find she was gone. Panic set in. Witnesses who saw the fall rushed to help, but there was little anyone could do. The terrain was remote, with poor cell service, and it took hours for emergency crews to arrive. A helicopter touched down just before midnight, but recovery would have to wait until the following day. Back in Australia, Christy's family received the devastating news. Rumors quickly circulated that she'd fallen while taking a selfie, but her mother, Millie, was quick to correct the story. Christy hadn't been showing off or standing at the edge. She had simply been stepping aside when tragedy struck. Bringing Christy home was another challenge. Norwegian authorities needed time to complete investigations, and it took 10 agonizing days before her body could be returned to her family. Christy's accident was the first fatality recorded at Trolltunga. It sparked conversations about safety on the trail. There were no barriers, and many hikers arrived unprepared for the physical demands of the climb. Tour guides reported injuries and rescues every season, and the trail's growing popularity on social media had only increased the risks. Christy was adventurous, kind, and full of promise. She wasn't just a tourist. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend. Her passing was a cruel reminder that nature, while breathtaking, doesn't forgive small missteps. To those who knew her, Trolltunga will never be just a hiking trail again. It's where a bright light was lost too soon. One of the most intense moments in Hajj history, the 2006 stampede in Mina, near Mecca, Saudi Arabia. It happened on January 12th during the Hajj pilgrimage. right in the middle of the stoning of the devil ritual. This ritual involves millions of pilgrims symbolically pelting 3 large pillars with pebbles as a gesture of resisting evil. It's one of the most crowded events in an already packed pilgrimage, and the energy is high. The temperatures are sweltering, and the crowd is jammed shoulder to shoulder like a human sea in white robes. Everyone is focused, emotional, and determined to complete this sacred rite. But on that particular day, chaos broke loose. A single stumble, likely caused by someone tripping over a bag, or maybe just an unlucky foot placement, caused a chain reaction. Within seconds, people started falling. Those behind had no idea what was happening and continued to move forward, unaware that the front had turned into a crushing zone. The result was devastating. Bodies piled, people screamed, and the already overwhelming crowd became a death trap. Emergency responders rushed in, but the damage was already done. By the end of it, at least 360 people had lost their lives, with hundreds more injured. Sandals, bags, and personal belongings were left scattered in the aftermath, marking the path of panic and tragedy. This wasn't the first time a stampede had happened during Hajj, and the Saudi authorities faced massive criticism for failing to prevent another disaster. The pressure was on to revamp the entire crowd control system. In response, they went all in. The Jamarat Bridge got a major upgrade with more levels, wider walkways, better signage, and high-tech surveillance systems to monitor and manage crowd movement. They introduced better scheduling systems to spread out the flow of pilgrims, reducing the likelihood of deadly congestion. The 2006 stampede was a wake-up call, one that showed how even the most sacred and well-intentioned events could spiral into catastrophe, if not handled with extreme care. The lesson was loud and clear. When you've got millions of people moving through tight spaces, precision isn't optional. It's everything. Even small missteps, like a stray suitcase or a momentary trip, can snowball into disaster on a massive scale. What made the tragedy even more heartbreaking was the sheer humanity of it all. These weren't just statistics or faceless crowds. These were people who had saved their entire lives, traveled across the globe, and were fulfilling one of the most significant spiritual milestones in their faith. Many were elderly. Many had waited decades for the chance to stand in that very spot. And in the midst of that deeply personal and spiritual journey, they found themselves caught in a crush of panic and confusion. The tragedy didn't just leave physical damage, it left a psychological mark on everyone who witnessed it. The image of white-robed pilgrims helping one another, desperately trying to pull people from the chaos, and offering prayers in the aftermath became symbols of both heartbreak and resilience. The reforms that followed were necessary, but they came at the cost of lives. Since then, every year during Hajj, those reforms have been put to the test. More effort goes into planning, spacing, and protecting the pilgrims. And while challenges still exist, the 2006 stampede remains a grim reminder of what happens when things go wrong. It was a moment in history marked not just by tragedy, but by the determination to make sure such horror is never repeated. Katherine Chappelle had what many would call a dream career. A brilliant visual effects editor, her work lit up the screens of millions. She helped shape the world of Game of Thrones, even earning a Primetime Emmy for her efforts on the epic Season 4 finale, The Children. Born in December 1985 in Westchester County, New York, Katherine's path took her from Hofstra University in Long Island to the vibrant entertainment world of Vancouver. She left her mark on blockbusters like Captain America, The Winter Soldier, and Divergent. Her talent was unmistakable, and her future in the industry was incredibly bright. But beyond the red carpets and computer screens, Katherine had another passion: wildlife conservation. In 2015, she traveled to South Africa, not for work, but to support Wildlife ACT, a conservation charity dedicated to protecting endangered species. Her mission was heartfelt: raise funds, raise awareness, and do something meaningful outside the realm of Hollywood. On June 1, 2015, Katherine found herself in Johannesburg's famous Lion Park, a popular destination where visitors could get up close with Africa's most majestic predators. She was accompanied by a guide from Calabash Tours, and the day was shaping up to be unforgettable for all the right reasons. The sun was out, the landscape was stunning, and the lions were in view. But in one fatal moment, the day took a horrifying turn. As their vehicle approached a group of lions, Katherine did what many tourists would be tempted to do. She opened her window to snap a photo. It seemed harmless, a quick shot of the wild. But that small decision unleashed a tragedy. Without warning, a lioness lunged through the open window. The attack was swift, brutal, and shocking. Her guide, Pierre Potgieter, fought back with everything he had, throwing punches at the lioness in a desperate attempt to save Katherine. Witnesses say the lion retreated after the initial strike, blood dripping from her mouth and paws, but the horror wasn't over. The lioness returned, launching a second, even more devastating assault. Katherine was torn apart. Her face and chest were brutally mauled. The scene was beyond anything anyone could have imagined. Pierre's heroic efforts came at a cost. He suffered a heart attack from the stress and trauma and was hospitalized shortly after. An eyewitness, Ben Genter, who was in the car behind them, captured a photo of the lioness just before the attack, never realizing the nightmare about to unfold. The aftermath sent shockwaves through the public. How could something like this happen, especially with a guide present? Lion Park officials insisted that all visitors were repeatedly warned to keep their windows closed at all times. It was a strict rule designed for everyone's safety, but in that fleeting moment, one open window changed everything. Katherine's family and boyfriend were devastated. At her memorial, her sister Jennifer described her as fearless, someone who embraced life without hesitation. Her boyfriend recalled warning her to be cautious, reminding her she was still a city girl in unfamiliar territory. Catherine Chappelle's tragic end serves as a gut-wrenching reminder. Even the most beautiful places on Earth can turn deadly in an instant. One moment of wonder, one misstep, and a life full of promise was gone forever. On July 18, 2023, 71-year-old Steve Curry laced up his hiking boots and headed out for what was supposed to be just another adventure. A seasoned outdoorsman from Sunland, California, Steve had spent his life chasing the thrill of the wild, rock climbing, mountain biking, hiking through the harshest terrain he could find. To him, nature wasn't something to fear, it was home. That morning, he set off into Death Valley National Park, one of the most unforgiving landscapes on Earth. The sun was already blazing, and by the afternoon, the temperature had climbed to a blistering 121 degrees Fahrenheit, 49 degrees Celsius. Most people were staying inside, or, at the very least, far from the scorching desert trails. But not Steve. He had hiked from Golden Canyon to Zabriskie Point, a popular lookout that offers panoramic views of the arid, surreal landscape. There, he ran into a reporter from the Los Angeles Times. The heat was brutal. When asked why he'd chosen to hike in such extreme conditions, Steve just smiled and said, "Why not?" He was wearing a sun hat, sunscreen, and carried a backpack, confident and prepared. Or so it seemed. What many forget, or simply don't realize, is that Death Valley doesn't play fair. It's the hottest place on the planet, home to the world record temperature of 134 degrees Fahrenheit, 57 degrees Celsius, recorded back in 1913. The canyon walls don't just hold the heat, they amplify it, bouncing the sun's rays back at you from every direction. Even seasoned hikers can find themselves overwhelmed. Steve continued his trek despite warnings from park officials about the dangers of venturing out after mid-morning. As he made his way back toward the trailhead, the unrelenting heat finally caught up with him. Around 3:40 p.m., just steps from a restroom near the Golden Canyon trailhead, Steve collapsed. Bystanders rushed to help and called 911. Park rangers arrived quickly and performed CPR, even using a defibrillator in hopes of reviving him. But it was too late. Steve had succumbed to the intense heat. He died doing what he loved, but underestimating one of the most dangerous forces in nature. Back home, his wife, Rima, had no idea where Steve had gone that morning. She expected him to walk through the door later that day, tired but smiling. Instead, she found a coroner's notice pinned to their front door. Her worst fear had come true. Speaking to reporters afterward, Rima painted a picture of a man who was endlessly curious, fearless, and full of life. Steve loved sleeping under the stars, cooking by campfire, and pushing himself on rugged trails. But she also shared a sobering truth. The heat, she said, is not a foe you can overcome. Death Valley's dangers are real, and they don't discriminate. The park is vast, mostly unshaded, and nearly void of natural water sources. Even experienced hikers like Steve can fall victim to heat stroke when the body's cooling system shuts down, leading to dizziness, confusion, unconsciousness, and, in severe cases, death. The location where Steve collapsed is far from immediate help. High temperatures in the area also make helicopter rescues more difficult or even impossible. That same summer, another man died after his car's air conditioning failed, leaving him stranded in the intense heat. Death Valley saw 29 days of 110 degrees Fahrenheit, plus temperatures that season alone. Still, people keep coming. Some are drawn by the challenge. Others simply don't realize the risk until it's too late. Park rangers continue to urge visitors, avoid hiking after 10 a.m., stay hydrated, wear light clothing, and most importantly, know when to turn back. Steve Curry was no amateur. He respected nature, but in the end, even a lifetime of experience wasn't enough to outmatch Death Valley. His story serves as a powerful reminder. Adventure is thrilling, but survival always comes first. As Rima said, the heat is not a foe you can overcome, and sometimes knowing when not to go is the bravest thing you can do. On the night of December 31st, 2008, the Santika Club in Bangkok, Thailand, was packed with people eager to ring in the new year. It was a scene filled with flashing lights, thumping music, and the excitement of celebrating what was supposed to be a fresh start. But just hours into the celebration, disaster struck. Around 1 a.m., fireworks, part of the New Year's festivities, ignited flammable materials on the club's ceiling, sparking a devastating fire. In an instant, the nightclub was engulfed in flames. The panic that followed was immediate and chaotic. The club, known for its vibrant atmosphere, had a major design flaw: narrow exits and overcrowding. These issues, combined with inadequate fire safety measures, created a deadly combination. As the fire spread rapidly, those inside found themselves with few options for escape. The smoke thickened, the heat intensified, and many couldn't make it out in time. When the fire was finally put out, the damage was clear. At least 67 people lost injured, many of them severely. The loss was felt deeply throughout Bangkok and beyond, as people realized just how close to disaster they had been. What was meant to be a night of joy became one of sorrow and loss. The aftermath of the Santika Club fire was a wake-up call for the city and the nation. Investigations revealed a shocking series of safety violations. The club had exceeded its maximum capacity, and fire exits were either blocked or poorly marked. The fire alarm system was either malfunctioning or completely absent. These critical oversights contributed to the severity of the tragedy, highlighting how easily a celebratory night could turn catastrophic due to a lack of proper safety measures. The fire not only raised questions about the safety standards in place at nightclubs, but it also revealed serious lapses in enforcement and oversight. How could a club operating in one of Asia's busiest cities be allowed to function under such dangerous conditions? The public outcry that followed led to tighter regulations and increased scrutiny of entertainment venues across Thailand. The Santika Club fire became a symbol of the consequences of negligence and the need for urgent reform. It served as a stark reminder that safety must always come first, no matter the occasion. The tragedy also sparked changes in fire safety regulations and emergency response strategies, particularly in crowded venues, ensuring that future events would be safer for everyone involved. For many, the memory of that night remains haunting. It's a sobering reminder that no amount of excitement or celebration can justify putting lives at risk. The Santika fire was a pivotal moment, one that led to tangible changes in how safety is handled in places where large numbers of people gather. As we reflect on the lives lost that night, we also remember the importance of vigilance and responsibility. both in maintaining safe environments and in honoring the lives of those we lost to prevent a similar tragedy from happening again. On October 5, 2022, 24-year-old Sebastian Mahia turned on a water heater in his Airbnb rental in Rio de Janeiro. He was simply trying to enjoy a warm shower after a long day. What he didn't know, what no guest could have anticipated, was that this ordinary act would end his life. Within minutes, a silent, invisible killer, carbon monoxide, filled the room. And just like that, a life filled with brilliance, purpose, and promise was stolen. Born on May 9, 1998 in Miami, Florida, Sebastian was the son of Rosa Elena Martinez Bettis and Jimmy Mejia Londoño, both immigrants from Colombia. He grew up in Miramar, where his sharp intellect and deep curiosity were evident early on. By the time he graduated summa cum laude from Palmetto Ridge High School in 2016, it was clear that Sebastian was destined for big things. He went on to attend Florida State University, where he earned a dual bachelor's degree in Latin American and Caribbean Studies and International Affairs, with a minor in Portuguese. Again, he graduated summa cum laude in May 2020, a testament to his academic drive and dedication. But Sebastian wasn't just about the books. He poured his heart into everything he did. Throughout college, he served as an English instructor and child care provider in Managua, Nicaragua, while also tutoring and teaching in Tallahassee and Naples, Florida. He volunteered with the Tallahassee Bail Fund and the Frenchtown Urban Farm. He didn't just study his community, he served it. At FSU, he also stepped up as a leader, acting as director and event coordinator for the Coalition for Latinx Studies. Sebastian was passionate about his heritage. He traced his roots to the Muisca and Panch peoples and committed himself to understanding their history and advocating for their recognition as indigenous communities in Colombia. His research took him from dusty archives to remote villages, from the Amazon to the Andean highlands. His work wasn't confined to classrooms. It lived in the communities he visited and the people he met. In spring 2021, he earned a departmental fellowship to New York University. There, he began his master's degree at the Center for Latin American and Caribbean Studies, diving deep into topics like indigeneity, capitalism, and social movements in Brazil and Colombia. By the fall, he was in Rio de Janeiro, pursuing a prestigious Fulbright Research Fellowship, collaborating with historians at the Federal University of Rio. Then came that tragic October day. In his Airbnb bathroom, a malfunctioning gas water heater began leaking carbon monoxide, a colorless, odorless gas. The exhaust duct was damaged and incorrectly installed. The bathroom had no ventilation, no escape for the fumes, and worst of all, no carbon monoxide detector. By the time anyone realized something was wrong, it was too late. Sebastian's body was discovered the next day. A police investigation confirmed what experts dread. The water heater installation violated building codes. The exhaust system was faulty. It was an accident waiting to happen, one that could have been prevented with a single carbon monoxide detector. Despite marketing itself as a company committed to safety, Airbnb doesn't require hosts to install carbon monoxide alarms. Even after Sebastian's death, the company never reached out to his grieving family. In June 2023, his parents filed a lawsuit against Airbnb in California State Court, not just for justice, but in hopes of preventing another tragedy like this. But no legal victory can undo what was lost. No settlement can replace a son, a scholar, a future changemaker. Sebastian Mahia was more than a victim of a faulty heater. He was a rising star, a bridge between cultures, a champion of justice. His life mattered, and it should never have ended like this. It was a cold, rainy day, November 27, 2017, deep in the Chernobyl exclusion zone in Ukraine. Dmitri Schkinder, a 33-year-old urban explorer from Zhodzina, Belarus, was doing what he loved most, venturing into places most people wouldn't dare step foot in. This time, his destination was Chernobyl too, a heavily restricted military zone tucked within one of the most radioactive regions on Earth. Dmitri wasn't alone. He was joined by two friends, a man and a woman, both fellow explorers. They were part of a niche community known as stalkers, urban adventurers who illegally sneak into forbidden or abandoned areas. For them, the risk was part of the thrill, and in this world, Chernobyl is the ultimate prize. After the 1986 nuclear disaster, Chernobyl and the surrounding areas were evacuated and sealed off, left to decay in silence. But the ruins attracted a different kind of visitor. People like Dmitri, drawn by mystery, danger, and the ghostly remains of a world frozen in time. Chernobyl, too, in particular, was infamous. Hidden behind fences and radiation signs stood the Duga radar, a massive Cold War relic, 150 meters tall, made of rusted steel beams and eerie, decaying platforms. Once used to detect incoming missiles, it now loomed like a skeleton over the forest, calling to explorers like a siren. But this wasn't a good day for climbing. The weather was rough. Strong winds and steady rain had turned every metal rung slick and treacherous. Still, Dmitri and his male friend couldn't resist. They wanted to reach the top of the Duga, to conquer one of the most iconic and illegal climbs in the world. Their female companion stayed on the ground, watching. Dmitri was no amateur. He had years of experience exploring decaying buildings and forgotten ruins. He was known for being careful, methodical, even in dangerous conditions. But no amount of skill could protect him from what happened next. As they climbed higher into the storm, a powerful gust of wind hit. The rain-slicked steel offered no grip. In a split second, Dmitri slipped. He fell 15 meters, his body slamming against the cold metal structure before crashing down. His friend could do nothing but scream for help. Emergency services were called, and an ambulance arrived quickly, but it was already too late. Dmitri didn't survive the fall. The urban exploration community was stunned. Dmitri had a reputation for being cautious, someone who respected the risks. His death hit hard. To make it even more haunting, just moments before he fell, Dmitri had taken one final photo, an eerie snapshot from high above the trees, capturing the view from the top of the radar. It would be the last thing he ever saw. The tragedy didn't end with his fall. Authorities responded swiftly. His two companions, despite their shock, were charged with illegally entering a restricted zone. Both were fined, and the woman, who had never even left the ground, faced deportation. Dmitri's body was transported back to Belarus, where a grieving wife and 3 children waited for a husband and father who would never return. His death became a sobering reminder. Even the most experienced explorers aren't invincible. Chernobyl, too, remains a chilling monument, not just to Soviet history, but to the dangers of pushing past the boundaries of safety in search of adrenaline. Urban explorers still sneak into the zone, driven by curiosity, thrill, or the desire for the perfect photo. But Dmitri's story stands as a warning. Some places are abandoned for a reason, and sometimes the cost of adventure is a price too high to pay. In July 2018, what was supposed to be a dreamy day of island hopping in Phuket, Thailand, turned into a tragic nightmare. On the afternoon of July 5th, the skies looked a little moody, but 2 tourist boats still set out to sea. One of them, the Phoenix, carried 89 people, mostly Chinese tourists, eager for a sunny day of snorkeling and sightseeing. The other boat, Serenita, had 42 people on board and was on a similar route. Both were sailing despite official weather warnings about an incoming storm. As the boats made their way back toward Phuket in the late afternoon, the sea turned hostile. Waves swelled, winds howled, and the ocean began throwing a full-blown tantrum. The Serenita managed to survive the storm, returning to shore with drenched but unharmed passengers. The Phoenix, however, wasn't so lucky. Battling violent waves near Koh Hei, Coral Island, it capsized and sank, leaving dozens of passengers tossed into the churning sea. Emergency services launched a high-stakes rescue mission involving divers, helicopters, and patrol boats. The conditions were brutal, with rough waves and murky water making every minute count. Divers searched the sunken wreckage under immense pressure. When the operation finally ended, 47 people had lost their lives, nearly all of them Chinese nationals. It became one of the worst maritime disasters in Thailand's recent history. The aftermath unfolded in a storm of grief, frustration, and action. The Phoenix should not have been out at sea in the first place. Investigations pointed to a chain of preventable issues. The tour company ignored storm alerts. The crew lacked proper training, and the boat itself raised serious concerns about seaworthiness. Reports highlighted structural flaws in the Phoenix and questioned the lack of life jackets and proper safety equipment. The vessel, it turned out, had more holes in its protocol than a slice of Swiss cheese. The Thai government was thrust into the spotlight, along with the tour operators and maritime authorities. Arrests were made, including the captain and the tour company's owner. Public pressure mounted, especially from Chinese officials and the victims' families, pushing for accountability. Authorities in Phuket scrambled to tighten regulations, enforce vessel inspections, and clean up the mess left behind by years of lax oversight. In the wake of the disaster, the tourism industry in Thailand took a serious hit, particularly with Chinese travelers who had once made up a large portion of the country's tourist base. Confidence had been shaken. Sweeping changes were introduced. Stricter rules, mandatory safety checks, and weather monitoring protocols became more than just optional suggestions. Despite the tropical setting, the incident cast a long, dark shadow over Thailand's tourism industry. The image of the Phoenix, lying broken beneath the waves, served as a powerful symbol of what can go wrong when warnings are ignored and corners are cut. The victims' families mourned deeply, while the nation wrestled with the consequences of putting business ahead of basic safety. Phuket, with its turquoise waters and picture-perfect beaches, still attracts thousands every year. But beneath the surface, the memory of that tragic day in July lingers. The legacy of the Phoenix continues to shape safety reforms and remains a chilling reminder that the sea, beautiful as it is, demands respect. In the end, it wasn't just a storm that caused the tragedy. It was the storm of negligence, overconfidence, and avoidable mistakes that sank the Phoenix and changed the tide of Thai tourism forever. In January 2013, Sarai Sierra, a 33-year-old mother of two from Staten Island, New York, embarked on her very first solo trip abroad. Fueled by her deep passion for photography, Sarai set her sights on Istanbul, Turkey, a city bursting with culture, history, and architectural splendor. She longed to capture its energy through her lens, turning inspiration into art. For Sarai, this wasn't just a vacation. It was a dream, a personal quest, and a bold adventure into the unknown. Originally, she planned to travel with a friend, but when those plans fell through at the last minute, Sarai chose to go alone. She didn't let fear or uncertainty hold her back. She embraced the opportunity, trusting that the world was as beautiful and open as she hoped to find it. For days, she wandered through ancient alleyways and busy bazaars, photographing domes, minarets, and quiet corners of everyday life. Her camera was her constant companion, her way of seeing the world and sharing it. Throughout her stay in Istanbul, Sarai remained in close contact with her loved ones. She sent messages, video chatted with her children, and posted photos and updates on social media. Her family felt reassured by her frequent communication, by her joy, and by the sense of wonder in her words. She was happy, thriving, doing something just for herself. But on January 21st, the day she was scheduled to fly home, Sarai never arrived at the airport. She didn't board her flight. She didn't call. She simply vanished. Her disappearance triggered immediate alarm. Her husband, Steven Sierra, and her brother, David Jimenez, flew to Istanbul to search for her. They worked alongside Turkish authorities, distributed missing person flyers, and retraced her steps. Istanbul, which had once been a place of artistic inspiration, was now the epicenter of a desperate search for answers. The investigation gained international attention. Surveillance footage showed Sarai alive on January 21st, captured by security cameras in a food court and walking down a street. She wore the same outfit in which her body would later be discovered. Clues were scarce. Her belongings, passport, clothes, phone charger, and medical cards were still in her rented room, suggesting she hadn't intended to leave permanently. 12 agonizing days passed before the truth was uncovered. On February 2nd, Sarai's body was found near the remnants of the ancient city walls in Istanbul's Sarai district. The area, frequented by tourists during the day, had become the scene of a horrifying crime. Sarai had suffered a fatal blow to the head. A blanket found nearby suggested she had been moved after death. Her family's worst fears had come true. What was supposed to be a personal journey of growth and creativity had ended in a nightmare. Turkish authorities launched a sweeping investigation. They questioned 9 suspects and pored over DNA evidence. Eventually, a breakthrough came. A homeless man named Ziya Tasala was arrested. Under interrogation, he confessed. He admitted to approaching Sarai as she took photos near the city walls. When she resisted his advances, he struck her with a rock. His DNA matched evidence found at the scene. In June 2014, he was convicted of Sarai Sierra's murder and sentenced to life in prison. Her death stunned both Turkey and the United States. Sarai had been a careful traveler, a devoted mother, and a woman simply following her passion. Her murder cast a harsh spotlight on the dangers faced by solo female travelers around the world. Sarai Sierra never made it home, but her story lives on, not just as a tragedy, but as a testament to courage, creativity, and the deep yearning we all share to explore and experience the world. On October 30th, 2019, Dung Yukang, a bright university senior from Hunan, China, set out on what she hoped would be a memorable adventure. She was heading to the Huashan Scenic Area in Shanxi Province, a place known not just for its jaw-dropping beauty, but also for its reputation as one of China's most dangerous hikes. Towering peaks, sheer cliffs, and thrilling trails attract thousands every year, and Dung was excited to experience it for herself. Like many travelers today, Dung wanted to document her journey. She posted photos and updates throughout her hike, sharing the stunning scenery and her joy with friends and family back home. Everything seemed to be going well, but none of them could have known those would be the last photos she'd ever post. Her final stop was the West Peak Observation Deck, a popular viewing spot perched high above the ground. The view from there is nothing short of spectacular, with panoramic sights that stretch across the rugged mountainscape. But there was a catch. The safety railings at that deck were shockingly low, just about 60 centimeters high, barely reaching an adult's thigh. Like many tourists, Dung wanted a perfect shot to mark the moment. She stood near the edge, adjusting her phone for the best angle. With her back to the drop, she leaned in slightly to get it just right, but the surface beneath her was uneven, and in a split second her foot slipped. She lost her balance and fell backward over the railing. The drop was over 2,000 meters. No one noticed immediately. It wasn't until the next day that search and rescue teams located her body. Security footage later confirmed what had happened. Dung had slipped while taking a selfie. There were 5 tourists and 2 staff members on the deck that day, but no one could react quickly enough to stop the tragedy. In the aftermath, the Huashan Scenic Area Management addressed the incident but denied any fault. According to them, the railing met safety standards, and Dung's fall was the result of her own actions. They initially offered her family a sum of 40,000 yuan, about $5,700, as humanitarian aid, but again accepted no responsibility. Her family was devastated and outraged. To them, the idea that 60-centimeter railings were considered safe on a mountaintop observation deck was absurd. They also criticized the delayed response in locating Dung after her fall, arguing that faster action might have made a difference. The family questioned whether park staff had truly warned tourists about the risks. Management claimed they had, but Dung's loved ones weren't convinced. They believed that with stronger barriers and better precautions, this tragedy could have been prevented. As public pressure grew and media coverage intensified, the park eventually increased the offer to 170,000 yuan, about $24,000. But even then, they continued to insist they weren't to blame. Dung's death sparked wider conversations about safety in popular but hazardous tourist destinations, like Huashan Mountain. Despite its beauty, the mountain is infamous for its narrow trails, vertical drops, and sections where visitors must walk on wooden planks bolted to cliff sides. Official fatality numbers are hard to come by, but it's believed that dozens may lose their lives there each year. Dung's story became a chilling reminder of how easily things can go wrong when we underestimate the dangers of nature, especially in the pursuit of that perfect photo. Her family fought not just for compensation, but for accountability and for better safety measures so no one else would suffer the same fate. Still, the park held its ground, claiming the tragedy was unavoidable. Today, Huashan continues to draw thousands of thrill seekers, its risks unchanged. And Dung Yukang's story remains a haunting reminder that behind every breathtaking view, danger can quietly wait just one step away. On April 17, 2025, what was supposed to be a peaceful, scenic ride up a mountain in southern Italy turned into a horrifying tragedy. The Monte Phto cable car, which usually offers stunning views of the Bay of Naples and a gentle escape from the bustling streets below, became the center of a devastating accident when one of its cabins suddenly fell more than 100 feet into a ravine. 4 lives were lost, 1 person was critically injured, and questions began pouring in faster than rescue crews could reach the scene. The victims included a British couple, Elaine and Graham Wynne, who were enjoying retirement and living out their dream of traveling the world. Also on board was Janan Suleiman, a young Arab-Israeli woman, and Carmine Parlato, the Italian cable car operator who was just doing his job that day. Janan's brother, Thabe Suleiman, somehow survived the fall with serious injuries and was rushed to the hospital, where he was later reported to be in stable condition. To make things worse, there was another cabin filled with 16 passengers that ended up stranded in the air. Imagine being stuck mid-air, dangling over the mountains, with no idea what just happened or if you were next. Thankfully, all of them were safely rescued, although the weather wasn't exactly on their side. Thick fog and 60-mile-per-hour winds made the operation incredibly dangerous and difficult. What caused this tragedy? Early reports pointed to a snapped cable. Now, in most cable car systems, when something goes wrong with the main traction cable, an emergency brake is supposed to kick in. That's the safety net. But in this case, it looks like the brake didn't do its job. That's one of the key things investigators are digging into. The Italian authorities launched a full-blown manslaughter investigation to figure out whether this was a freak mechanical failure, human error, or something else entirely. The timing of it all adds another layer to the story. The cable car had only reopened 10 days earlier, following routine seasonal maintenance. That naturally raised eyebrows. Was something missed? Was a shortcut taken? It's still under investigation, but people want answers, and fast. The public, understandably, is shaken, and officials are under serious pressure to review safety protocols across all cable car systems in the country. Monte Phto's cable car has been a fixture in the region since 1952. It's not just a mode of transportation. It's a part of local life and a tourist favorite. But this isn't the first time it's been involved in a fatal accident. Back in 1960, a pylon collapsed, killing 4 people. History, repeating itself 65 years later, has only added to the heartbreak and the sense of urgency to ensure this never happens again. The response across Italy was one of shock and sorrow. Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, who happened to be in Washington at the time, publicly expressed her condolences. Locals, tourists, and the international community alike mourned the loss of lives that day. It was a grim reminder that even something as serene as a cable car ride can carry risks when systems fail. In the end, this incident wasn't just a mechanical disaster. It was a human one. It affected families, shattered travel dreams, and raised tough questions about safety and oversight. As the investigation continues, the hope is that out of this tragedy will come reform, accountability, and better protections to prevent something like this from ever happening again.